All right, the fireworks have started early on Wall Street. The June jobs data is out, and it's a bit weaker than expected in some regards, better in others. We'll have the numbers and full analysis on what it tells us about the Fed and the economy. Hey, everyone, I'm Lauren Lister of Yahoo Finance's Market Movers. It is Jobs Thursday on Wall Street. Investors are shifting their attention away from the Greek debt drama that is still unfolding and focusing on the latest employment data just released before they head out for the 4th of July holiday. Now let's bring in Yahoo Finance's senior columnist Mike Santoli and Joe Brusuelis, chief economist at McCladrey. Mike, walk us through the numbers. Unemployment rate coming in a little better than expected at 5.3%, a little light on non-farm payrolls at 223,000 jobs added.
Yeah, so that was just slightly below the 230,000 forecast. Unemployment rate, as you mentioned, down to 5.3 from a revised 5.4, although the participation rate was down. So basically people not in the labor force accounting for a lot of that decline in the unemployment rate. Also net revisions from prior months in terms of jobs down 60,000. So below the surface, kind of lukewarm. Also average hourly earnings flat. The expectation was for up 0.2%. That also was kind of coming down from a pretty big wage gain number in the prior month. So it looks like the market's taking this as kind of benign, not stronger than expected, certainly.
Now, Joe, right before we started the show, you said your prediction was for 225,000. You were pretty much right about that. What jumps out at you in this report?
Well, what jumps out at me is that we want to look closely at the composition of hiring here. In this time of the year, you get a lot of weird statistical and seasonal quirks. So what we saw was no net additions in government hiring. I'm almost certain that that had to do with losses at state and local education, which you almost see every single year in June. This likely actually understates the true pace of job growth in the economy. What you're seeing is just a bit of a payback over the last several months where we've seen some real strong growth, even that decline in the unemployment rate. Okay, what happened was over the past 2 months, 500,000 people entered the workforce because wages actually are going up. We just saw a little bit of a break in June. You'll see that reaccelerate. I would fully expect that the United States labor force will be in full employment, roughly around 5.2% by the end of the year. Okay. By the way, this jobs report, even if it did miss the expectations, the expectations were a little bit too Pollyanna for me this time. This is supportive of a rate hike by the Fed in September. Remember, the Fed doesn't look at average hourly earnings. They look at the employment cost index, wages and salaries, which are up 2.8% on a year-ago basis. That's more than enough for the Fed to move on rates.
And I also want to point out that dynamic about the labor force and people re-entering it to find work, which we saw last month, and then falling out of it or not entering at the same rate, that was something you also predicted going into this report today. So I just wanted to give you a little hat tip on that. You can do a victory lap after the show. Mike, are you on board with Joe for what this means to the Fed and how this fits into expectations of a rate hike in September?
I do think so. I mean, I think it doesn't really change the path at all. It basically is an on-trend report in terms of the total amount of job gains. I feel like the Fed is kind of, as Joe suggests, looking for that excuse to get going here, and September is as good a time as any. I think something would really have to disturb the overall global picture, or job growth would have to go off the rails for this to essentially change that story. We're at the 6th anniversary of the beginning of the recovery, the end of the last recession. It's probably time to get off zero, and the Fed recognizes that.
Okay, and I want to hear what you think about wages, because wage growth was flat, and we did see a pickup last month in wage growth, and overall, it's been pretty mediocre during this recovery. So what is your assessment of if wages are picking up, or what can we can deduce from June?
Okay, well, two things. One is the labor market decisively turned in January of 2014. Since that point, we've actually added more high-wage jobs than low-wage jobs, roughly by about 300,000 overall net. Now, within the June report, even though I don't have the data as I'm looking at it here as it comes in, my sense is we probably added a lot of jobs in retail and leisure and hospitality. So that might be even, or the low-wage jobs might have created a little bit more low-wage jobs in June. But nevertheless, as business services continue to hire, robust hiring in construction, hiring in manufacturing, hiring in finance and banking here in the city, I think moving forward throughout the remainder of the business cycle, hiring, or the composition of it, is going to be tilted more towards higher wage jobs. And this is what one should see mid to late business cycle.
What about the average work week? It's been 34.5 hours for some time. That was expected for June, and that is what we saw. What does that tell us about the labor market?
It's hard to know exactly if that's going to be the thing, first of all, that we focus on that much on an ongoing basis. I don't really know. I mean, because typically that would have been the thing that you would see people stretching existing workers out a little bit longer. But we still do have this overhang of people who are working part-time for economic reasons, as they call it. I don't know if it's something structural in terms of how companies operate or not, but it is something that's been a little bit stubborn.
Well, two things. One is if you want to know where income's going, look at aggregate hours. That's actually been up sharply. Now, with respect to the 34.5, we're going through a structural phase where we are beginning to implement the ACA. Now, that's not going to be declared unconstitutional. That's now going to be law going forward. And many firms are carefully managing their part-time work, especially those who work in the 25 to 29-hour bucket per week, because they want to be careful not to let them move over 30.
Are you seeing evidence of that?
I'm seeing some preliminary evidence. I'm looking at the micro data inside the U.S. Census. It's very hard to disentangle, and it takes some time. But I don't have the statistical proof right now, but my gut tells me that we're likely seeing a real net increase in that particular hour bucket. And as we move in the years on out and we get more robust data, I think that's what we're going to find.
And the BLS called out job growth in June in professional and business services, as you said, healthcare, the retail trade, also, as you said, financial activities, another one you called out, transportation and warehousing. The long-term unemployed falling by 381,000. I don't know, is that a significant number? And what does this tell us about job growth in the second quarter, or excuse me, economic growth in the second quarter, if anything?
In terms of the long-term unemployed, I do think that shows you slowly the slack being wrung out of the labor market. So it's not something that's dramatic on a month-to-month basis, but that is trending lower, and that pretty much remains in place.
So what I do is I tend not necessarily to look at the U3 rate, although that's what we talk about, especially when you're doing financial media. I create what's called the U6, U3 spread, the underemployment rate minus the true unemployment rate. That's now down to 5.2%. The long-term average is 4.4. So we actually are moving quickly toward de facto full employment. And that's something that policymakers, especially the ones who tend to be the swing vote in the committee, they're going to be very, very pleased with the progress in that particular metric over the past 6 months.
Well, so then do you think the decline we've seen in labor force participation more broadly are due to structural factors then, if you see us getting back to full employment?
Well, one thing is we have 10,000 people retiring a day, so that's going to account for about a third of that. But we do have some structural challenges out there. One of the things, I don't care which side of the aisle you're on in Washington, there are 31.5 million men between the age of 20 and 50 who are out of the workforce. That's a problem any way you slice it.
All right.
So yeah, that's going to continue regardless of what happens in the economy.
Okay. And then just before we go, how does the market take this report today, gentlemen? We're ahead of a holiday weekend. Is anybody paying attention?
I think the market takes it in stride and just sort of says, okay, fine, got that. Now let's figure out what's going to happen with Greece right now. So it doesn't change, again, the trajectory of what the Fed might do, monetary policy expectations. I think it's more about, let's see if we're going to get a shock. Right now, it doesn't really look like we had the stirrings of that in the market.
Right. Futures are up. Are we going to see fireworks, or are the fireworks going to come July 5th when we have this Greek referendum?
Yeah, risk off the table. Everybody gets up on Sunday morning and sees if they have to go to work Sunday afternoon. That's about it.
All right. Well, have a nice vacation until then. Thank you, Joe Bruce-Wallace, Mike Santoli. That wraps up Market Movers this morning. I'm Yahoo Finance's Lauren Lister. We'll see you back here again on Monday. Have a happy and safe 4th of July.